Beach House in Baltimore and WNST.net. Summer means baseball. And, around here, it's the 4th of July, and we got the red, white, and blue going on, but the Orioles are in Toronto at a very tender time. The great country of Canada, where I have many hats that I wear all over the world. It is the 150 going on, and they're going to have a party up there. This guy is not only Canadian, but also a former Major League Baseball player, sort of East Detroit Canadian in Windsor, but now in Toronto as the longtime broadcaster of the Toronto Blue Jays and one of our defending champs around here. We welcome Joe Siddall back here. You can follow his journey out on Twitter at Siddall Joe. And Joe, we thought we had a better version of the Blue Jays. We thought we had a better version of the Orioles. Right now we're trying to see who's going to stay out of last place for the 4th of July, right?
Yeah, that's not the way this was supposed to go, right? Coming out of spring training, I think both teams are battling a little bit, but similar in a lot of regards. The Blue Jays almost came out so poorly in April, it just really shocked everyone. And I think anytime you get off on the wrong foot, you just dig yourself this huge uphill battle, but they were able to respond. They had a great month of May to kind of recover and get back in it. But here in the month of June, they continue to just kind of battle that 500 thing, and they just can't seem to get there. And I see the Orioles are having their struggles as well. So really, we've got two teams that just aren't really on the right track, and maybe a few days we'll do that for one of them. But either way, I think both of these teams also know that they're right in it in this AL East. This division is a really funny animal this year. The Yankees looked like they were going to run away with things, but they've kind of come back to earth. So no need to fret. There's still lots of baseball to be played.
I watch the Orioles every night, Joe, and I've never seen anything like this. I mean, you played the game at a very high level, and you had ups and downs, and it's a humbling game, and everybody has some downs. But Manny Machado hitting 220 right now, the injuries they've had, but more than that, there's no cavalry coming for this pitching. You're among many people I've talked to in Toronto this week. It feels like, all right, maybe Sanchez will come over the edge, and, maybe we'll get Happ back to where he was, and things will get better, and we'll hit the ball a little better, and maybe we'll make a deal, and maybe Shapiro will deal more prospects away. Maybe they're going to go for it now. But for the Orioles, boy, when your pitching stinks like this, and you come into series like this, and you look down at the stats and see that the Orioles are going on to their a dozen starts for guys that have ERAs in the 7s and the 8s, I mean, that really speaks to the fact that you have no other options.
Well, it's difficult because I think depth for any team is a big issue when it comes to starting pitching. The Blue Jays have seen it, too, with their injuries. You dig down to AAA, and guys come up that have been pitching well, and they just can't get it done. And I've always said AAA to the major leagues is not just one jump. I think it's about 5 jumps. It's just a different league up here. And with the Orioles' rotation already thin, and then if you were to get injuries, it's a battle because the only way you're really going to be able to heal those kinds of wounds, I think, is by going out and doing something. And it depends on the situation of your club. And with the Blue Jays, a new regime in here, and I don't think they're going to be selling off prospects like they did before to get to 2 postseasons, but you may take on a contract if you have the dollars. So there's different ways of doing it. But again, boy, it's just difficult in this division, too, when your starting pitching is already suspect, and now you're facing some of the lineups. Now, the Blue Jays lineup hasn't been themselves, and I know as an opposition, whenever the Orioles come into town, they're going to hit. You just have to expect it. And I think, with guys like Chris Davis on the DL, that's going to hurt your lineup as well, too. But the Orioles lineup is just so powerful, and we see the Orioles so much in the AL East that there's never a dull moment. And I'm sure that the bats will be alive again.
I think the one sign of life for the Blue Jays is as much as they stunk in April and how bad it was, they've been among the better teams in the American League. Houston's running away with everything, but they have not played bad baseball since May 1st. The Orioles have played dreadful baseball since May 1st, and if there are ships passing in the night, this will be a time for that to happen. Give me some signs of life for the Blue Jays, Joe. Obviously, Justin Smoak, I don't know where this is coming from at 30, but we're all looking for that fountain of youth, right?
Well, Justin Smoak has been something special, and I certainly hope he does get to the All-Star game. I think he will, as maybe even the Blue Jays' lone representative. But he just continues to do it, and that's what's amazing. And, it is only the first half of the season, but when you see something for a couple months, the Blue Jays had this with Michael Saunders, and he got voted into the All-Star game and then had a horrible second half, and he got released by the Phillies there a couple weeks ago. So you hope that that's not what this is, but Justin does look like a very different hitter than we've seen. And you hate to say that sometimes these veteran guys have track records, but this has proven that everyone's allowed to improve and get better, and he's done that. He's made some adjustments. He's certainly laid off a lot of the breaking pitches we've seen him swing at in the dirt in the past. But I think for me, the shining light is going to be this rotation. This is the best rotation in the American League last year. They've been absolutely battling it, the health issue. They were very healthy last year, and oh my goodness, does that ever make a difference, doesn't it? But this year they've had the injuries. Happ is back. He's had a few starts since he's returned, and now he's starting to look like J-Hap again. That's great news. Marco Estrada has had all kinds of struggles, much better last time out in Kansas City. So if he rectifies his issues, now you're starting to get everything back. Aaron Sanchez, as we speak, should be back just before the All-Star break. He may make a start against the Astros. Now you got everybody back. I think if that rotation can get back to being healthy and doing what they do best, now you give your team a chance every day. Bottom line is the offense has to swing the bats better, though. This is not the same offense as the last couple of years. And if they don't turn it up, then you have to pitch that well, and that's tough to do. But I think it revolves around the rotation first. Get these guys healthy, intact, and I think they can make a run in the second half.
Joe Siddall joining us here. He is Siddall Joe out on Twitter. That's Siddall. Longtime Blue Jays broadcaster and former big leaguer himself. And boy, as a big leaguer and as a guy who I'm sure you had your own mental struggles and your own problems and your ups and your downs, the Roberto Osuna story is really incredible because I think everyone at one point in their life has felt like, boy, I might be in over my head, or, I'm struggling right now, or I'm feeling a little down or a little tired, whatever it might be. But for a guy that's had so much success so early in his career, a guy that's clearly going to make a lot of money playing this game and already has, this was 20 years ago you wouldn't have seen this, right, Joe?
Well, that's the thing, and I think it's a good thing that we are seeing it, that it has come out to the forefront a little bit for everyone publicly, and we know this is a horrible thing for someone to suffer from. I don't think I can or you can imagine what's going on with Roberto. I think the best news was that he pitched on Sunday. I think that's a great thing. John Gibbons brought him into the game against the Royals. Blue Jays were up big 8-2, but the fact that he was available was huge. The fact that he did not pitch Friday night is very concerning, and that's why it became such a big issue. Listen, this is a mental game. There's no question. There's a lot of failure in this game, especially for hitters, but pitchers as well. And you're battling things. You're battling family things. These guys are away from home. He's young. He's been thrust on this pedestal as one of the best closers in the game at 22 years of age. So there's a lot going on in this young man's life. Who knows what happened to cause this? But the fact that he was not available to pitch, in other words, go to work that day, that's a concern. And I know the Blue Jays are addressing it, but the great news is that he pitched on Sunday, and hopefully he is overcoming that. I think only time will tell. But he's a tremendous young talent, but I know the Blue Jays, and I think everyone close to the team, and me included as a broadcaster, we hope more so the best for Roberto Osuna, the person.
Well, and I think the other part of this is, you're around this all the time, with guys, they have so much success, and you see them as a rotisserie player. You see them as a machine like we did when we were kids. And, you find out that, they do have full days and they have other things going on. And he's obviously been very comfortable out on the mound, right? I mean, that's not the problem. The problem isn't going out there and getting 3 outs in the ninth inning. And that's the problem for most baseball players, right? I mean,
he's been very good on the field. That's what's really puzzling, but it goes to show you that there's an awful lot going on in these players' lives besides what's happening between the lines. And I'll be the first to admit, I've talked about Roberto since he came to the big leagues with the Blue Jays as this kid that's mature beyond his years and how confident he is. And he played professional baseball in Mexico as a teenager because he had the bloodlines, and that's how he came up. So we continue to promote him and talk about how wonderful and confident all these things, and then this happened. So I think it's a real, for me, it was a real eye-opener because you just never know. And I think that's the most important message for everyone to take. And more importantly than anything is it's okay. He came out. There's an issue that he's addressing, and hopefully he can do that. But most importantly, get the help because he's not the only one. He's not on an island by any means.
All right, so for the rest of this way, in your mind with the Blue Jays, conjure me up that way that they get to 91 or 92 wins and they become a real factor in this thing and they catch fire. I mean, it really is, if the pitching stabilizes, they have a real chance to do this because you think the hitting might be better, right? I mean, I don't think Tulowitzki's shot, and I know he had a rough start in the beginning. You're getting Steve Pearce back and forth. Donaldson could certainly be better as well, but the injury bugs also hit that lineup. You can just look down at the at-bats and see they haven't been right for most of the year. They haven't had it where they want it.
Well, you're right. I think first and foremost, as I've already mentioned, the starting rotation looks like it's coming into form. So that's a great sign because to me, right away, if your rotation's intact and successful, you're giving your team a chance to win every day. And that's great. Now, the lineup has to swing it. They have to swing the bats better. They're still not even, they've got the long ball power, but not like last year. And last year, they would draw walks and get on base a lot. We're not seeing that as much. It's not that they strike out a ton, but the average is down. They just don't get on base as much. And as we know, that's the goal of this game is to get on base and score runs. So it's just been a different offense. And whether you want to say guys are still too big with their swings and maybe not, situationally, it just has not been good. They've been at the bottom of the league, hitting with runners in scoring position all season long. So clearly adjustments need to be made so that if you're not going to score a ton of runs, you better score them when they're out there at least and cash in, and those are the ones that can help you win a ball game. So the offense certainly has to be better, but it has been difficult because you really haven't had the same lineup out there with Tulowitzki and Donaldson out for so long early on. I think for me, the devastating loss offensively, to be honest with you, is Devin Travis. And another injury has gotten him. This is a kid who struggled out of the gates in April because he had an off-season knee surgery, and I consider the month of April was still spring training for him. There was plenty of talk that he wasn't even going to be ready for opening day, but he was. Struggled mightily, but then he was Mr. May, and he was Mr. Doubles in the month of May. And that's just such a valuable offensive component when you're hitting doubles because he's line to line. He can cover all pitches, in and out, change in speed. He was just a very key part of this lineup, and for him to go down, not only did they lose some offense, but they lost one of those all-around solid hitters that can do so much damage.
You know, the strikeout thing, you and I are pretty much the same age. You grew up in the same era. I mean, there was Dave Kingman and maybe Reggie Jackson, Bobby Bonds, and a handful of other guys, maybe Canseco. But, you know, the strikeout thing, you mentioned it in your last refrain about they don't make contact enough. Well, you can't hit doubles when you don't touch the ball. And the strikeout thing, you know, it's really a sort of a pandemic baseball thing, and I think it's become comfortable and accepted that we're going to have 4 or 5 guys in our team that are going to strike out 120 times. We have that in Baltimore. I call that beer league softball. That's certainly not the way my dad would have taught it. But when you put a team together with Smoke and Morales and Batista, just knowing what you're getting into, you're going to strike out a lot. And I don't know that that's ever going to change, right?
Well, yeah, and I think, too, over the last number of years, we're seeing more of home runs and strikeouts. It's just the way it is, and I don't think hitters are shortening up, quote, as we used to see in baseball. You know, now it's rare. Joey Votto came to town, the Cincinnati Reds, a little while back, and wow, was he ever fun to watch. We don't see a whole lot of National League Baseball, or especially Votto, and being a Canadian in Toronto, it was a big deal, but I'll tell you what, is he ever fun to watch, choking up on the bat a little bit and shortening up and trying to avoid the strikeout and put in play, and you can do so much more damage. I always try to tell kids that if you take 10 at-bats and you choke up a little bit and put it in play instead of take 10 of your strikeouts and do that, not only are you going to put it in play 10 times, but you'll probably get a couple hits out of it. It might be a little blooper over the shortstop's head, but you're giving yourself a chance, and I just don't think we're seeing hitters do that in baseball a whole lot anymore because, hey, the other thing is some people, and Chris Davis was one, was rewarded for hitting the long balls and striking out a lot. Now, last winter, Chris Carter was not rewarded for it. So maybe we're starting to see that change, and maybe as that changes and the home runs and strikeouts don't necessarily get rewarded financially, maybe we'll see that come back a little bit. So I'm not sold on it, but it just seems that we are in an all-or-nothing game right now, and I don't think it's good for the game, to be honest with you.
Joe, my dad's been dead 25 years, and every time I hear somebody like you say choke up on the bat, all I think of my dad is my dad telling me that, right? 2 strikes, choke up on the bat a little bit. When you say choke up to a 12-year-old, they probably think you're vomiting, right? I mean, they don't even know what that term means, right?
Well, it's too bad, and that's why they need to turn on the TV and watch it. Joey Votto, one of the best hitters in the game, that he does it. And when he does it, obviously it should be okay. Barry Bonds choked up on his bat. But I think the point is, however you want to do it, make an adjustment, change your approach, change your swing a little bit with 2 strikes. I had a great chat with Corey Dickerson, who I know you guys see a lot with the Tampa Bay Rays, a fine hitter. And he talked a lot about that, too. And you watch him. Watch every at-bat. Each pitcher, he talked about different pitchers he faces, that he adjusts. When he faces a Marcus Stroman who might quick pitch on occasion, he spreads out a little bit and more so has a 2-strike approach the whole at-bat. When he's got a guy with a traditional delivery, he'll go back to his leg kick. So that's what I mean about a good hitter, and I don't think there's as many of those in the game these days because of the desire to try to hit the long ball. But that's what I love watching guys like that.
Joe Sid, a longtime radio broadcaster with the Toronto Blue Jays team as well as television. And, hey, Joe, big picture on this thing. With the Orioles and the Blue Jays struggling a little bit, and over the last 5 years, you guys have dealt away a bunch of younger players in your organization. Obviously, we watch, the Red Sox have one of our pitchers. The Brewers have one of our pitchers. There's a guy on the north side of Chicago named Arrieta. I know you're familiar with as well. And we see all of that happen when you get into these pennant races year after year and you go gutting your franchise, and then you look up and you see where the Yankees are after cashing in all their chips last year and where they sit, where the money is, where the Machados and the Harpers might be 16, 18 months from now. I worry greatly for your fan base, for our fan base, I think for Tampa, for what the Yankees and the Red Sox are attempting to do now with a bunch of young players, with an arsenal of money, and with players that look like they're going to stick around. I mean, the Judge and Sanchez thing are very, very scary for anyone in Toronto or Baltimore that sat on the outside of the American League East while being on the inside in the cellar for a decade and a half, watching those teams just load and reload every year.
Yeah, there's some special young players. That's no question. And I think when you look around the game, it's just become a young man's game, hasn't it? I mean, the older type veterans, quote, slower type players are going to phase out a little bit sooner. And you can talk about the PED era, however, whatever you want to attribute it to. But it is clearly a young man's game. There are a lot of young stars. But when you, in the Blue Jays situation, you see what they did to get to the postseason in 2015, and they sold a lot of prospects off, traded them off, and it worked. But there's a price to pay, and that price is right now where you don't have those big league ready prospects now. So I think when Mark Shapiro and Ross Atkins came in here, in baseball takes a while, right? It's not like other sports where you draft the top pick and they're ready to contribute at the major league level. So it's going to take time, but I think with this Toronto fan base after getting here twice, I think ideally, and I don't know how easy this is going to be to do, but you try to keep competing, but sustain a competitive team, each team, while you, quote, rebuild. I don't want to use the word rebuild because that's when I don't think what's going to happen here, but you keep some of your pieces, but you add some youth to try to keep competing. We know that it's just a competition to get to the postseason. It's pretty hard to win a World Series. But once October rolls around, to me, it's a one-month tournament. So it's just a way of finding your way into that postseason. And if you can do that and keep your fan base very interested for 6 months, that's a pretty good thing each and every year. It's a great thing for the fans. There are some great young players in this game, and I know from the Blue Jays' perspective, they've got some churning now. It's just going to take some time before they get up there.
How's our boy Steve Pearce doing? He's always a Baltimore fan favorite. We see him coming. He always comes in here in some other uniform these days, but we remember.
Steve Pearce is a major league hitter. That's the first thing that comes to my mind when you mention his name. He's battled the injury bug, but you know all about that. And it's been tough. He's playing left field now, and he had a calf strain, so he's out for a bit. He got off to a rough start, terrible start. And as we know, sometimes when players sign with a new team, what do? You try to really impress, and he might have been pressing a little bit, just wasn't himself. And we've seen a lot of Steve Pearce in the AL East, so we know him very well, and I know what kind of hitter he is. But he was scuffling, and then he just started getting hot before his calf strain, came back from the disabled list, and he's still been pretty good. So I still think he's going to see a lot of time in left field. But you guys know him very well, too. The injury bug has followed him, and that's been the case again here. But still a pretty good big league hitter in this lineup, and he keeps rolling. Then we've got some length throughout these 9 here in the Blue Jays.
Percentage of sober people this weekend in Canada for 150. Over, under. What do you got on it, Joe?
Well, 47,689, or whatever the sellout is. I tell you, it's a special day. I know 4th of July is special in the United States, but Canada Day at the Rogers Centre for a Blue Jays game has to be my favorite. You got a lot of patriotic people. It's a lot of fun. They're at a ball game. It's a holiday. I mean, it's summertime. The list goes on and on and on. It's just a special day, and it will be again.
Well, and the Red Sox as well. So we'll try to get in there and sneak 2 out of 3 and get out of there before you guys get a little crazy over the weekend. We get a little crazy here. Always great to have you on, my brother. Sorry we didn't get together during that Leafs Cap series a couple months ago. I was up there, spent 4 days up in Canada. They were trying to adopt me in, but Trump let me back across the border here. So I'm going to stay in America for a little while. But you got a great place up there. And, hey, that hockey team kind of lit them up too now, didn't it? I mean, that is the summer story up there, right?
Yeah, it was pretty exciting. I spent a lot of nights on my couch in the wintertime watching the Leafs, and it was a lot of fun. It's a good, young, exciting team. I think they're going to be something to be had here in the future.
Call them straight. We'll see you again later on in the year. Thanks for the time, Joe.
Hey, my pleasure. Have a great day.
You got it. Joe Siddall joining us here. You can find him at Siddall Joe. That's Siddall. Longtime Blue Jays broadcaster and former big leaguer and a real Canadian, by the way. So he's probably drinking a Canadian beer as he should. You can find me on the Buy a Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear. Our morning newspaper delivers to your email inbox, even north of the border, if you shall. It's all digital. It's all at 7 a.m., and it's all brought to you by Planet Planet Fitness and planetfitness.com. So sign up for our morning newspaper. You'll get that every morning and be caught up on everything we're doing around here. Don't forget the text service is always there for you with breaking news and the Norfolk shuttle as the Orioles see fit on a day-to-day basis to try to figure their pitching out while they're in Toronto, back home against the Rays this weekend. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram. Streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. Don't forget the Peter Principles, Chapter 8 launching this week. The Albert Bell era. You'll want to read that. It's kind of a chunky one, too. Chapter 8. It's got a lot of meat on the bone there. I had some days with Albert and Terry Bell. One day I'll tell that story. I think I did tell it at some point, and I have a tape of it. Maybe I'll play it during one of our best of weeks. But the day that Terry Bell called me and screamed at me for 14 minutes prior to my show, it was lovely, the Albert Bell era. I miss all that excitement around here. Now we just have bad pitching. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.